Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars through the bridge windows of the UES Defiance. The ship had been traveling for 3 weeks now, mapping new systems on the edge of human space. It was routine work, but someone had to do it. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the sensors," said Chief Engineer Lisa Rodriguez from her station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that made Jake turn around. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, walking over to her console. Lisa pointed at the screen showing swirling energy readings. "There's some kind of anomaly about 2 million kilometers off our starboard bow. The energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases." Navigation Officer Ryan Blake looked up from his charts. "Sir, that area should be empty space according to our long-range scans." Dr. Amanda Fox, the ship's first contact specialist, moved closer to examine the readings. She had joined this mission hoping to find signs of alien life, though everyone knew the chances were slim. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Maybe some kind of space-time distortion? "The readings are off the charts," Lisa said, adjusting her instruments. "Whatever it is, it's generating massive amounts of energy, but it's stable, not random like you'd expect from a natural event." Jake studied the data. As captain, he had to make the call. They could mark the anomaly's location and report it to Earth, or they could investigate. His orders were to explore and document anything unusual they found. "How long would it take to reach the anomaly?" he asked Ryan. "About 6 hours at current. Speed, sir. Any danger to the ship?" Lisa checked her readings again. "The energy levels are high, but they seem contained. I don't detect any radiation or harmful particles. It should be safe to approach." Jake made his decision. "Set course for the anomaly. All departments, prepare for possible first contact protocols. This could be our first real discovery." The next 6 hours passed slowly. The crew ran constant scans as they approached the strange energy signature. Communications Officer Tony Garcia monitored all frequencies for any artificial signals. Xenobiologist Dr. Karen Walsh prepared her equipment for possible alien encounters. "Captain, you need to see this," Ryan called out as they got closer. His voice was tight with excitement and worry. On the main screen, space itself seemed to be twisted into a spiral pattern. Energy crackled along the edges of what looked like a hole in reality itself. The anomaly was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "It's some kind of wormhole," Amanda said, staring at the display. "But the energy patterns suggest it might be artificial." "Artificial?" Jake asked. "You mean someone built this thing?" "The mathematical precision of the energy flows suggests intelligent design," Lisa added, running new calculations. "This isn't a natural wormhole, Captain. Someone or something created this." Tony suddenly looked up from his station. "Sir, I'm picking up faint signals from the other side. They're not on any human frequency, but they're definitely artificial." Jake felt his heart rate increase. This was it. This was what every deep space explorer dreamed of finding. Evidence of alien intelligence. "Can you determine where it leads?" he asked Ryan. "The exit point appears to be stable, sir. Based on the energy readings, I estimate it connects to a system approximately 1,500 light-years from here." 1,500 light-years, Jake repeated. "That would put us well beyond any human exploration." The bridge fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They were looking at a doorway to the unknown, possibly created by an alien civilization. The discovery would change everything for humanity. "Sir," Amanda said quietly, "this could be the most important moment in human history." Jake nodded slowly. He understood the weight of the decision. They could return to Earth with the news, letting others make the choice to explore. Or they could step through that doorway themselves and see what lay on the other side. "Lisa, what's the status of our ship?" he asked. "All systems are operating normally, sir. We have full power and all equipment is functioning. Tony, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've discovered what appears to be an artificial wormhole of alien origin. Include all our sensor data and our current position." "Yes, sir," Tony replied, working at his console. "Message transmitted, but it will take 6 months to reach Earth at this distance." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, trained for exactly this kind of situation. If anyone could handle first contact with an alien civilization, it was them. "All right, people," he said, returning to his command chair. "We didn't come out here to play it safe. Lisa, take us through the wormhole, slow and steady." The Defiance moved forward carefully. As they approached the swirling energy, the ship's instruments went crazy for a moment. Then everything went white. When the light faded, they found themselves in a completely different star system. But this wasn't empty space like they had expected. Massive structures filled the view around them. Ring-shaped objects the size of planets orbited distant stars. Ships larger than Earth's biggest cities moved between artificial worlds that shouldn't exist. "My God," Amanda whispered. "It's an entire civilization." The structures were clearly artificial, built with technology far beyond anything humans possessed. Some of the ships were so large they had their own gravity fields. Cities floated in space without any visible means of support. "Sir," Tony said, his voice shaking slightly. "We're being scanned, multiple sources, very powerful." "Are they hostile?" Jake asked, trying to stay calm. "Unknown, sir, but they definitely know we're here." Karen was studying the alien ships through the sensors. "Captain, the design patterns suggest a highly advanced civilization. These structures must have taken thousands of years to build." Before Jake could respond, Ryan spoke up with alarm in his voice. "Sir, multiple contacts approaching fast. I count at least 20 ships and they're big." On the main screen, sleek, alien vessels appeared, moving with impossible grace toward the Defiance. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of the human vessel, their hulls gleaming with unknown metals and pulsing with energy. "They're surrounding us," Ryan reported. "We're completely boxed in." Jake gripped the arms of his chair. This was it. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization, and they were outnumbered 20-1 in the heart of what was clearly a vast interstellar empire. "All stop," he ordered. "Hold position and wait. Let's see what they want." The lead alien ship moved closer, its hull reflecting the light of distant stars. Whatever happened next would determine the future relationship between humanity and this incredible civilization they had stumbled upon. The adventure was just beginning. The alien ship docked with the Defiance with a soft thud that vibrated through the hull. Jake Morrison stood in the main airlock with Dr. Amanda Fox and 2 security officers, waiting to meet the first aliens humanity had ever encountered. The airlock cycled, and Jake got his first look at the beings who had built this incredible empire. They were tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with crystalline features that caught the light. Their skin seemed to be made of living gemstone, shifting between blue and silver. They wore ornate uniforms covered in symbols that might have been rank insignia. The leader stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like music played through crystal. A small device on his chest translated his words into English. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You have entered sovereign space of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire without permission. State your species and origin." Jake tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. We're humans from the planet Earth in the Sol system. We came through the wormhole by accident during an exploration mission." Admiral Kethvar's crystalline features shifted, perhaps showing surprise. "Accident? You claim ignorance of the Empire's existence?" "We had no knowledge of your empire or your people," Amanda said, stepping forward. "This is our first contact with any alien civilization." The alien admiral studied them with eyes that sparkled like diamonds. "Curious. It has been many cycles since a species discovered us by chance rather than through our expansion." He paused, then continued with formal authority. "No matter. You are here now, and Imperial law is clear." "What law?" Jake asked, though he had a feeling he wouldn't like the answer. "All species who encounter the Zephyrian Empire must choose, submit as vassals and provide tribute to the Emperor, or face complete destruction. These are the only options that have ever been offered." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "You're telling us to surrender or be destroyed? Just like that?" "It is not surrender," Kethvar replied, his tone suggesting he had given this speech many times before. "It is acceptance of reality. The Zephyrian Empire spans over 4,000 star systems. We control the trade routes, the resources, and the military power of this region of the galaxy. Resistance is not merely futile, it is impossible. Amanda tried to maintain diplomatic calm. Surely there must be some other option. Some way our peoples can coexist without conquest. There is no coexistence with the Empire, only service to it. Kethvar gestured to one of his companions, who activated a holographic display. Behold the reality of our power. The hologram showed star maps with thousands of systems marked in Zephyrian symbols. Each dot represented conquered worlds, subjugated species, entire civilizations that had accepted imperial rule. Over 10,000 years, more than 200 species have faced this choice, Kethvar continued. All chose survival over destruction. All now serve the Empire faithfully. What kind of service? Jake asked, dreading the answer. Each world provides what it can. Resources, labor, soldiers, knowledge. The Empire is vast and requires much to maintain itself. In return, you receive protection, trade opportunities, and the peace that comes from imperial order. Jake felt anger building in his chest. And if we refuse? Then your species ceases to exist. Every human world, every human ship, every trace of your civilization is eliminated. The Empire has done this before when faced with stubborn species who chose extinction over wisdom. The casual way the alien spoke of genocide made Jake's hands clench into fists. These beings talked about wiping out entire civilizations like it was routine business. How long do we have to decide? Amanda asked, trying to keep the discussion practical. 30 of your standard days. This is generous. Some species receive less time depending on their military capabilities. Kethvar activated another device. This beacon will remain aboard your vessel. When the time expires, it will summon the Imperial fleet to receive your answer. A small crystal device materialized on the deck between them, pulsing with internal light. The fleet that comes will be substantial, Kethvar added. Emperor Thisara herself will oversee your species' integration into the Empire. It would be wise to have your tribute and oath of loyalty prepared. And if our answer is no? Jake asked quietly. For the first time, something like emotion crossed the alien's crystalline features. Then Emperor Thisara will demonstrate why no species has ever successfully opposed the Empire. Dr. Karen Walsh, who had been observing the aliens carefully, spoke up from where she stood behind the security team. Admiral, may I ask how many species have actually chosen destruction over joining your empire? Kethvar paused, considering the question. In the past 1,000 years? None. Word of the Empire's power spreads. Most species are wise enough to accept reality. But some have tried to resist? Jake pressed. Long ago, yes. The Kelrani fought for 50 years before accepting integration. The Thoric Alliance lasted only 6 months. All learned that resistance brings only suffering. Jake noticed that the Admiral didn't mention what happened to species that continued to resist. The implication was clear enough. We'll need to return to our home system to discuss this with our government, Jake said. Of course, the beacon will track your location but will not interfere with your movements. Use this time wisely, Captain Morrison. Study your people's military strength, count your worlds, calculate your resources. Then ask yourself if any of it matters against the combined might of 4,000 star systems. The aliens began moving, back toward their ship, but Kethvar paused at the airlock. Captain, I have overseen the integration of dozens of species. Those who accept their place in the Empire quickly find prosperity and peace. Those who delay acceptance suffer needlessly. Your people need not learn this lesson the difficult way. After the aliens left, Jake stood in the empty airlock with his crew, staring at the crystal beacon. Its gentle pulsing seemed to count down the days until humanity would have to make the most important choice in its history. Sir? Amanda said quietly. What do we tell Earth? Jake picked up the beacon, feeling its strange warmth in his hands. We tell them the truth. We tell them that we found an empire that rules the galaxy, and they've given us a month to decide whether to kneel or die. And what do you think Earth will choose? Amanda asked. Jake looked out at the massive alien ships surrounding them, then at the incredible structures that filled this star system. The Empire's power was beyond imagination. Any rational species would surrender immediately. But Jake knew his people. He knew their history, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, even when facing impossible odds. He knew that somewhere back on Earth, military commanders were already planning for war, diplomats were searching for alternatives, and ordinary citizens were preparing to fight for their freedom. "I think," Jake said slowly, "the Empire is about to learn why no human civilization has ever been successfully conquered." The beacon pulsed in his hands, counting down to humanity's answer. The emergency session of the United Earth Council was unlike anything in human history. Representatives from every nation sat in stunned silence as they watched the footage transmitted by the Defiance. The images of vast alien structures and crystalline beings speaking casually of conquest had shaken world leaders to their core. President Maria Santos stood at the podium, her face grim as she addressed the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face a choice that will determine the survival of our species. The Zephyrian Empire has given us 30 days to surrender or face extinction." General Peter Hayes, commander of Earth's unified military forces, stood to address the council. "Madam President, I've reviewed all available data on this alien empire. Their technology is clearly superior to ours. Their ships are massive. Their weapons appear to be energy-based, and they claim to control thousands of star systems." Diplomat Dr. Alan Brooks raised his hand to speak. "General, surely there must be some room for negotiation. Perhaps we can find a middle ground, some form of limited cooperation that doesn't require complete surrender." "Did you hear the recording?" General Hayes replied sharply. "They offered two choices: submit or die. There was no mention of negotiation or compromise." President Santos nodded grimly. "The alien admiral was very clear. Every species they've encountered has been forced to make the same choice, and apparently all have chosen submission over destruction." Dr. Sophie Turner, head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Research, stood from her seat. "Madam President, I've been analyzing the technical data from Captain Morrison's encounter. While their technology is advanced, it's not magic. Their ships use energy shields and directed energy weapons. Our kinetic weapons and nuclear missiles might be more effective against them than they expect." "Explain," President Santos said. "Their shields appear designed to deflect energy weapons, not physical projectiles. A nuclear warhead traveling at high velocity might penetrate their defenses. Also, their ships are large, which makes them easier targets but also suggests they rely on shields rather than armor for protection." Admiral Casey Miller, commander of Earth's space fleet, looked skeptical. "Dr. Turner, even if our weapons can damage their ships, we're facing impossible numbers. The Empire claims to control thousands of systems. We have 12 warships and a handful of defense platforms. Numbers matter," General Hayes agreed. "But so does fighting spirit. These aliens have been conquering civilizations for thousands of years. They expect immediate surrender because that's what they always get. They might not be prepared for a species that actually fights back." The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued for immediate surrender, pointing out that resistance would only bring suffering to humanity. Others demanded that Earth fight, regardless of the odds. Dr. Brooks stood again. "Even if we could somehow win a military victory, what then? They said this Admiral Keithvar was just the advanced scout. What happens when their real fleet arrives?" "Then we make them pay for every human life they take," General Hayes replied grimly. "Maybe we can't win, but we can show them that some species don't kneel." President Santos called for order as voices rose throughout the chamber. "The question before us is simple," she said. "Do we surrender our freedom in exchange for survival? Or do we fight for our independence knowing we might not survive?" Representative Chen from the Asian Federation spoke up. "What about evacuation? Could we move our population to other systems?" Admiral Miller shook his head. "Madam President, we don't have the ships or the time. Our fastest vessels would need months to reach the nearest potentially habitable systems, and we couldn't move more than a few thousand people. Besides," Dr. Turner added, "the beacon they left aboard the Defiance is tracking our location. They'll find Earth regardless of whether we try to run." The council fell silent as the reality sank in. There was no escape, no clever solution that would save humanity without cost. They truly faced the choice Admiral Kethvar had described: submit or fight. President Santos made a decision that would echo through history. We'll put it to a global vote. Every adult human gets to choose our species' future. The vote will be simple: accept the Empire's terms or reject them. The next week was the most intense in human history. Global networks broadcast debates between those advocating surrender and those demanding resistance. Military experts explained the hopeless odds, while historians reminded everyone of humanity's greatest victories against impossible opposition. The vote was scheduled for 7 days. During that time, Dr. Turner worked frantically with military engineers to design new weapons and defensive systems. Admiral Miller began positioning Earth's small fleet around key points in the solar system. General Hayes started mobilizing ground forces, knowing they might be humanity's last line of defense. Meanwhile, scientists studied every detail of the alien encounter, searching for weaknesses in Zephyrian technology. Communications teams tried to establish contact with resistance movements that might exist within the Empire, though they had no idea if such groups even existed. On the day of the vote, nearly 4 billion humans cast their ballots. The results were closer than many expected, but clear enough to determine humanity's future. President Santos announced the results to the world. The people of Earth have spoken. By a margin of 78% to 22%, humanity rejects the Zephyrian Empire's demands. We choose freedom over safety, independence over survival. We will not kneel. The announcement triggered massive celebrations in some cities and somber preparations in others. Everyone understood what the vote meant. In 3 weeks, the Imperial fleet would arrive expecting humanity's surrender. Instead, they would face a species that had chosen to fight against impossible odds. Admiral Miller immediately began implementing the defense plan. Every asteroid in the outer solar system was rigged with explosives or converted into weapons platforms. Earth's space stations were equipped with additional guns and missile systems. The moon became a fortress, its surface covered with defensive installations. Dr. Turner's teams worked around the clock to produce new weapons. If human technology was primitive compared to the aliens, then humanity would use quantity to overcome quality. Thousands of nuclear missiles were prepared, along with kinetic weapons designed to punch through energy shields. General Hayes coordinated with national governments to prepare ground defenses. If the aliens got past the space defenses, they would find every human city ready for war. 3 weeks later, sensors detected the approaching Imperial fleet. Over 200 alien warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, led by a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian ships from the first encounter. Admiral Casey Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, humanity's flagship, watching the alien fleet approach. Around him, the bridge crew worked calmly at their stations. They all knew the odds. They all knew this might be humanity's final battle. Admiral, his communications officer, reported, "The alien flagship is transmitting on all frequencies. Put it through," Miller ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was different from Admiral Kethvar's, deeper and more commanding. "I am Grand Admiral Thisara of the Imperial Fleet. Your time has expired. Prepare to receive boarding parties, and present your tribute and oath of loyalty to the Empire." Miller looked around his bridge, seeing determination on every face. These people had volunteered to stand between humanity and conquest, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. He opened a channel to respond to the alien commander. "This is Admiral Casey Miller of the United Earth Space Force. I have a message for your Empire." "Speak quickly," came the alien reply. Miller's voice was steady and clear as he delivered humanity's answer to the galaxy. "Tell your Emperor that Earth does not surrender. Tell him that humans do not kneel. Tell him that if he wants our world, he'll have to take it from us." The alien response was immediate. "Then you have chosen extinction. So be it." The first shots of the war for humanity's freedom lit up the darkness of space. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Parker floated in the cramped command center of the UES Shadow, humanity's most advanced stealth ship. While Earth prepared for war, His small team had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history, infiltrating the Zephyrian Empire to gather intelligence. "We're approaching the wormhole," reported his pilot, Captain Sarah Kim. "Stealth systems are active, but I can't guarantee they'll work against alien sensors." Ben nodded to his team. Dr. Helen Costa, Earth's best xenoarchaeologist, was studying alien cultural data. Sergeant Mike Torres handled security and reconnaissance. Engineer Rachel Park maintained their experimental stealth technology. "Remember, we're not here to fight," Ben told them. "We're here to learn. Earth needs to know what we're really facing." The shadow slipped through the wormhole undetected, emerging in the heart of Zephyrian space. For the next 3 weeks, they moved carefully between star systems, avoiding Imperial patrols while gathering crucial intelligence. What they discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about the Empire. "Colonel, you need to see this," Dr. Costa called from her station. She had been analyzing communication intercepts and cultural databases. "The Empire isn't what we thought." Ben moved to her workstation, where she displayed her findings. "What do you mean?" "The Zephyrians are advanced, yes, but they're not warriors, they're bureaucrats. Look at these communication patterns. Everything goes through committees, requires approvals, follows procedures. They've become comfortable with conquest through intimidation rather than actual fighting." Sergeant Torres looked up from his reconnaissance data. "That matches what I'm seeing, sir. Their patrol schedules are predictable, their response times are slow, and their formations are designed for show rather than combat effectiveness. More importantly," Dr. Costa continued, "most of their member species aren't loyal. They're compliant, but not loyal. I've intercepted hundreds of complaints, requests for reduced tribute, and reports of minor sabotage. The Empire controls through fear and bureaucracy, not through inspiring devotion." Ben studied the data carefully. "Are you saying the Empire is weaker than they appear?" "Not weaker in terms of resources or technology," Dr. Costa replied, "but weaker in terms of fighting spirit. They haven't faced real resistance in so long that they may not remember how to handle it." Rachel Park, monitoring their stealth systems, added quietly, "I've been analyzing their ship designs, sir. They're built for intimidation and long-range bombardment. Up close in a real fight, they might not be as effective as they look." Over the following days, the Shadow visited several Imperial worlds, staying hidden while observing alien society. What Ben's team saw confirmed their growing theory about the Empire's true nature. On the industrial world of Kepler 442, they observed massive factories operated by various alien species. The workers moved slowly, doing exactly what was required but nothing more. Production quotas were met but barely exceeded. The Zephyrian overseers seemed more concerned with paperwork than efficiency. "Look at this," Sergeant Torres whispered, as they observed a spaceport. "The security is all for show. Guard posts at regular intervals, but the guards are bored and inattentive. They're not expecting trouble because they never get any." Dr. Costa had been studying historical records. "In the Empire's databases, Ben, I found something incredible. The Empire has historical records going back 10,000 years. Do you know how many successful rebellions they've faced in that time?" "How many?" "Exactly 0. Not because they couldn't be defeated, but because no one has ever seriously tried. Every species has surrendered immediately upon seeing the Empire's size and technology." Ben felt a spark of hope for the first time since leaving Earth. "So they've never actually had to fight a determined enemy?" "Never. The closest thing was a species called the Kelrani, about 3,000 years ago. But even they only fought defensive actions for 50 years before surrendering. No one has ever taken the offensive against the Empire." Rachel Park made another important discovery while analyzing Imperial communications. "Colonel, their military structure is completely centralized. Every major decision has to be approved by the Imperial Command. Local commanders can't adapt or respond quickly to changing situations. That's a critical weakness," Ben realized. "If we can disrupt their command structure or force them to make decisions faster than their bureaucracy can handle, we might actually have a chance," Dr. Costa finished. But their most important discovery came when they reached the ancient Imperial archives on Zephyr Prime, the Empire's capital world. Using advanced infiltration techniques, Dr. Costa accessed historical records that painted a different picture of the Empire's past. Ben, the early Imperial expansion wasn't through conquest at all, she reported, excitement in her voice. The first 100 species joined willingly, seeking protection. From a galactic war that ended 8,000 years ago, the Empire's military was built for defense, not offense. What changed? Ben asked. Gradual mission creep. As they grew larger, they started demanding tribute from new members. Then they began forcibly recruiting species who discovered them, but it was always through intimidation and shows of force, never through actual warfare. Sergeant Torres had been monitoring Imperial military communications during their infiltration. Sir, I'm seeing something interesting in their fleet deployments. They rotate their ships constantly between systems, never keeping large forces in one place for long. It makes the Empire look bigger than it is, but it also means they're spread thin. How thin? Ben asked. If their ships are spread evenly across 4,000 systems, each system only has about 50 ships on average, and many of those are cargo vessels or civilian craft, not warships. Ben began to see the full picture. The Zephyrian Empire was, like a balloon, impressive from the outside but mostly empty air. Their power came from perception rather than reality. We need to get this information back to Earth immediately, he decided. If humanity is going to fight, we need to fight smart. The journey back to Earth was tense but successful. Omar slipped through Imperial space undetected, carrying intelligence that would change everything about humanity's defensive strategy. When they emerged from the wormhole, Ben found the solar system transformed. Every asteroid had been converted into a weapons platform. The moon bristled with defensive installations. Earth's small fleet had been reinforced with hastily converted civilian ships armed with nuclear missiles. Ben immediately transmitted his findings to Admiral Miller and General Hayes. The response was swift and dramatic. This changes everything, Admiral Miller said during the emergency briefing. If the Empire is as bureaucratic and unprepared as Colonel Parker's team discovered, we might be able to do more than just defend. General Hayes was already adapting their strategy. We've been thinking like the defenders in a siege, but if the Empire has never faced real resistance, maybe we should think like guerrilla fighters. Dr. Sophie Turner, who had been designing new weapons, looked excited by the possibilities. If their ships are designed for intimidation rather than combat, our kinetic weapons might be even more effective than we hoped. President Santos, joining the meeting by video link, asked the crucial question. Are you saying we might actually have a chance of winning? Ben chose his words carefully. Madam President, the Empire is still vast and technologically advanced, but they're not the unbeatable force they appear to be. They've grown comfortable with easy victories. They might not know how to handle an enemy that refuses to surrender and fights back with everything they have. Then we give them a fight. They'll never forget, Admiral Miller declared. As the Imperial fleet approached Earth's solar system, humanity prepared for war with new knowledge and new hope. The Empire expected another easy conquest, another species that would kneel rather than fight. Instead, they were about to face something they had never encountered in 10,000 years of expansion. A species that would rather die free than live as slaves. The real war was about to begin. Grand Admiral Thisara stood on the command deck of her flagship, the Imperial Dominion, watching the primitive solar system ahead of them. 200 Imperial warships formed an impressive battle line behind her, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. Admiral, her communications officer reported, long-range sensors show significant activity throughout the system. The humans appear to have fortified several positions. Thisara's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. Fortifications? How quaint. It has been many cycles since a species attempted actual resistance rather than immediate surrender. Her tactical officer brought up displays showing the human defensive positions. Admiral, they have converted asteroids into weapons platforms and established defensive installations on their moon. Their fleet appears to consist of 12 warships and approximately 40 converted civilian vessels. 52 ships against our 200, Thisara mused. Either these humans are remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. "Shall we proceed with standard intimidation protocol?" asked her flag captain. "A demonstration of force on their outer moon should convince them to reconsider." "Indeed. Target their lunar installations with the primary beam arrays. Once they see the futility of resistance, they will surrender like all the others." But as the Imperial fleet entered the outer solar system, they discovered that the humans had prepared a very different reception than expected. The first sign came when several asteroids that appeared to be simple mining operations suddenly revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms, nuclear missiles launched by the hundreds, streaking toward the Imperial fleet with primitive but deadly intent. "Evasive maneuvers," Thyssara ordered, surprised by the sudden attack. "Activate all defensive shields." The Zephyrian energy shields deflected most of the missiles, but the sheer number overwhelmed their defensive systems. Several warships took direct hits, their crystalline armor cracking under the force of nuclear explosions. "Report," Thyssara demanded. "3 ships damaged, Admiral. Their weapons are crude but effective in large numbers. Our shields are not designed for this type of bombardment." Before the Admiral could respond, human ships emerged from behind the moon, moving faster and more aggressively than expected. The UES Liberty led the charge, followed by Earth's small fleet and the converted civilian vessels. Admiral Casey Miller stood on the Liberty's bridge, watching the larger alien ships struggle to respond to humanity's unconventional tactics. "All ships attack pattern Delta. Hit them fast and get out before they can target us effectively." The human ships swarmed the Imperial formation like angry insects. Their smaller size and greater maneuverability allowed them to dart between the massive alien vessels, firing nuclear torpedoes and kinetic rounds at close range. Captain Jake Morrison, back in command of the rebuilt Defiance, led a squadron of converted freighters against the Imperial left flank. "Target their weapon arrays," he ordered his gunners. "If we can't destroy them, we can at least blind them." The battle became a chaotic melee, as human ships used their speed and desperation to offset the aliens' technological advantages. Nuclear warheads detonated against energy shields, kinetic rounds punched through crystalline armor, and humanity's refusal to retreat confused the Imperial commanders. "Admiral," Thyssara's tactical officer reported with obvious distress, "the humans are not following standard combat protocols. They're attacking without regard for formation or defensive positioning." "Of course they are," Thyssara replied, grimly. "They have nothing to lose. All ships form defensive formation Theta. We will crush them with coordinated fire." But the human attack had already achieved something no Imperial enemy had managed in thousands of years. The frigate Stellar Might, its shields overloaded by repeated nuclear strikes, suffered a catastrophic hull breach when Captain Morrison's Defiance rammed it at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a new star, marking the first Imperial warship destroyed in combat in over 3 millennia. The psychological effect on both fleets was immediate and profound. Human crews cheered as they saw that the aliens could be hurt, could be beaten. Imperial crews stared in shock at the expanding, debris field that had once been an Imperial warship. "Impossible," Thyssara whispered, staring at the tactical display. "No primitive species has ever—" "Admiral," her communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving transmissions from across the sector. Word of the battle is spreading through the Imperial communication network." Thyssara realized with growing alarm that news of this engagement would reach every corner of the Empire within days. For 10,000 years, Imperial invincibility had been the foundation of their control over hundreds of species. Now that foundation was cracking. "All ships, full offensive formation," she ordered. "We end this now before word spreads further." The Imperial fleet reorganized, bringing their massive firepower to bear on the human positions. Energy beams lanced out across space, destroying several human ships and badly damaging the lunar fortifications. But the humans didn't break. Instead, they adapted, using the debris from their own destroyed ships as cover while continuing their guerrilla attacks. Admiral Miller coordinated the defense from the Liberty, keeping his remaining ships moving and making every shot count. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost 8 ships, but we've damaged or destroyed 12 of theirs. The converted freighters are performing better than expected." Miller nodded grimly. The civilian volunteers who had joined the fight were proving that human determination could overcome technological disadvantages. Cargo pilots were ramming Imperial warships, passenger liner crews were fighting like veteran warriors, and even the oldest vessels were taking their toll on the enemy. The battle raged for hours, neither side able to achieve decisive victory. The Imperial fleet had superior numbers and technology, but the humans had superior motivation and tactical flexibility. Finally, Thisara made a decision that would haunt the Empire for years to come. Rather than continue the costly battle, she ordered her fleet to withdraw to the outer system and begin bombardment of Earth itself. "If we cannot defeat their ships efficiently," she announced, "we will destroy their world and end this resistance once and for all." But as the Imperial fleet began moving toward Earth, they received an unexpected transmission on all frequencies. It was President Maria Santos, broadcasting from Earth to the galaxy. "To all species under Imperial rule," her voice carried clearly, "through space. You have been told that resistance is impossible. You have been told that the Empire cannot be defeated. Today we have shown that both claims are lies." The transmission included footage of the burning Imperial warship, proof that Zephyrian vessels could be destroyed by a determined enemy. "We are human," President Santos continued. "We refuse to kneel, we refuse to surrender, and we call upon all free-thinking beings in the galaxy to join us in throwing off the chains of Imperial oppression." Thisara realized that she faced a problem no Imperial commander had ever confronted. Win or lose, this battle had already accomplished something that threatened the very existence of the Empire. It had proven that the Zephyrians could be defeated. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had submitted to Imperial rule centuries or millennia, ego beings who had never dared to dream of freedom began to wonder if resistance might actually be possible. The first shot of a galactic revolution had been fired, and there was no taking it back. As the Imperial fleet prepared for the final assault on Earth, Grand Admiral Thisara realized that regardless of the battle's outcome, the Empire she had served for her entire life was already beginning to crumble. Phew. Humans had done more than just refuse to kneel. They had shown the galaxy how to stand. On the industrial world of Thylos 7, worker Ketharn stared at the holographic display showing the battle in the Sol system. For 3,000 years, his people had served the Empire without question, believing resistance was impossible. Now, he watched primitive human ships destroying Imperial warships with weapons that seemed barely more advanced than rocks and fire. "Did you see that?" whispered his workmate Veltar. "They actually destroyed the Stellar Might, an Imperial frigate, destroyed by barbarians." Ketharn nodded slowly, his forearms trembling as he watched the replay. The Empire said it was impossible. They said no species could resist their power. All across Thylos 7, work slowed to a halt as Thylorian workers gathered around communication displays. The same scene was playing out on hundreds of worlds throughout the Empire as news of the battle spread through subspace communication networks. In the deeper sections of the galaxy, other species were having similar reactions. On the water world of Nereid Prime, the aquatic Nereidans floated in their work pools, discussing the implications of what they had witnessed. "The humans lost many ships," noted Elder Kefsara, her bioluminescent patches flashing with concern. "But they made the Empire bleed first. In 800 years of Imperial rule, we have never seen such a thing. What does this mean for us?" asked a younger Nereidan. Should we help them?" Elder Kefsara considered carefully. The Nereidans had been conquered through economic pressure rather than military force. The Empire controlled their trade routes and resources, making resistance seem impossible. "But if the humans could actually damage Imperial ships, we must be cautious," she said finally. "But perhaps we can find ways to support their resistance without direct confrontation." On Kepler Station, one of the Empire's major supply hubs, human refugee Rebecca Jones watched the battle coverage with tears streaming down her face. She had been stranded in Imperial space when her transport ship had mechanical problems 2 years ago. Since then, she had worked as a communications technician, one of only a few dozen humans scattered throughout the Empire. "Look at them go," she whispered to her fellow workers, a mix of various alien species. "Look at how they fight." The station's security officer, a tall Zephyrian named Vothek, approached the group watching the display. "Return to your duties," he ordered. "This illegal broadcast is over." But Rebecca stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the station's common area. "Illegal? Since when is it illegal to watch news broadcasts?" "Since those news broadcasts encourage sedition and rebellion," Vothek replied coldly. "The Empire will not tolerate propaganda that undermines lawful authority." Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope. "You're scared," she said, looking directly at the Zephyrian officer. "For the first time in your Empire's history, you're actually scared." Before Vothek could respond, she activated her personal communicator, broadcasting on all station frequencies. "This is Rebecca Jones, speaking to all humans in Imperial space, and to anyone else who wants to be free. Our people are fighting for our independence right now. They're showing the galaxy that the Empire can be beaten. Cease this transmission immediately," Vothek ordered, but Rebecca continued. "To my fellow humans scattered across the galaxy, remember who you are. Remember that we don't kneel. And to all the other species listening, you don't have to accept this oppression forever. The humans are proving that freedom is possible if you're willing to fight for it." Within hours, similar broadcasts were appearing throughout Imperial space. Humans who had been living quietly under Imperial rule began speaking out, organizing, and spreading the message of resistance. But more importantly, other species began to listen. On the agricultural world of Kepri 9, the insectoid Kepri workers began experiencing what Imperial sociologists would later call coordinated efficiency failures. Somehow, delivery schedules became confused, quality control systems malfunctioned, and critical components developed defects at precisely the wrong moments. "We must report these failures to Imperial oversight," declared Kepri supervisor Zekthul to his work teams. "Of course," replied worker Kithera, her compound eyes reflecting innocence. "Though perhaps we should wait until we understand the cause of these technical difficulties." The Kepri had been part of the Empire for over 2,000 years, conquered through superior technology and overwhelming force. But they were also a highly intelligent species, with a gift for engineering and subtle sabotage. If the humans could resist openly, perhaps the Kepri could resist in their own way. Similar accidents began occurring throughout Imperial space. Cargo shipments were rerouted to wrong destinations. Manufacturing equipment required unexpected maintenance. Communication relays developed intermittent faults. Dr. Amanda Fox, now leading a diplomatic team aboard a small scout ship, had been making contact with these growing resistance movements. Using intelligence gathered from Ben Parker's reconnaissance mission, her team identified potential allies among the Empire's subjugated species. "Rebecca, this is Dr. Fox aboard the UES Diplomat," she transmitted to Kepler Station using encrypted channels. "We're establishing a communications network for resistance coordination. Are you able to help?" Rebecca's response was immediate. "Dr. Fox, we have sympathizers among at least 6 species on this station alone. The Thylorians are already discussing work slowdowns, and the Nereidans have hinted at disrupting shipping schedules." "What about Imperial security?" Amanda asked. "Confused and overwhelmed," Rebecca replied. "They're getting reports of problems from dozens of systems, but they can't tell which ones are accidents and which ones are sabotage. Their bureaucracy is working against them." Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, the battle continued to rage. Admiral Miller's reduced fleet was holding defensive positions around Earth while the Imperial forces regrouped. But both commanders knew that the real war was no longer being fought in space alone. President Santos had been in constant communication with the growing resistance movements, coordinating a galaxy-wide campaign of defiance. "Admiral Thisara," she transmitted to the Imperial flagship, "your empire is crumbling from within. How many worlds are reporting problems today? How many species are beginning to question your authority?" Thisara's response was filled with barely controlled fury. "Temporary disruptions, nothing more. The Empire has dealt with minor rebellions before." "Minor rebellions?" President Santos replied. Check your communication networks. Check your supply lines. Check your industrial production reports. This isn't a minor rebellion, Admiral, this is a revolution. And she was right. Across the galaxy, the Empire's carefully maintained system of control was beginning to break down. Species that had been compliant for centuries were suddenly experiencing communication difficulties when Imperial orders arrived. Supply ships were experiencing navigation errors that delayed critical deliveries. Work crews were reporting equipment malfunctions that somehow always affected Imperial projects more than civilian ones. On Zephyr Prime, the Empire's capital, Emperor Zythael finally emerged from his ceremonial chambers to address the crisis. For the first time in 500 years, the ancient ruler was forced to deal with active resistance rather than routine administration. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. How can one primitive species cause such widespread disruption? It appears, Your Imperial Majesty, replied his chief strategist nervously, that they have inspired others to resist as well. Our subject species are becoming uncooperative. The Emperor's crystalline features darkened with rage. Then we will remind them why they submitted in the first place. Deploy the Imperial Guard. End this human resistance permanently, and make an example that will restore order throughout the Empire. But even as the Emperor issued his orders, more reports arrived of equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and accidents that were clearly too coordinated to be coincidental. The humans had accomplished something that no Imperial strategist had believed possible. They had shown the galaxy's oppressed species that resistance was not only possible but potentially effective. The revolution that had begun with humanity's refusal to kneel was spreading like wildfire through the Empire's vast territories. Species that had forgotten the meaning of freedom were beginning to remember what it felt like to stand up for themselves. The Empire faced its greatest crisis in 10,000 years, and it had all started with 52 human ships refusing to surrender against impossible odds. The galaxy would never be the same. Emperor Zythael had not left his meditation chambers on Zephyr Prime for over 5 centuries. The ancient Zephyrian ruler had spent those years in deep contemplation, confident that his empire ran itself through the careful bureaucracy he had established over millennia. Now, awakened by the greatest crisis in Imperial history, he stood before the massive holographic display, showing the chaos spreading across his dominion. Red markers indicated systems experiencing disruptions. There were hundreds of them. Explain to me, the Emperor said slowly, his voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years of rule, how a single primitive species has brought my empire to the edge of collapse. His advisors shifted nervously before the Imperial throne. None had expected to face questions like this when they accepted their comfortable positions in the Imperial administration. Your Majesty, began Strategic Advisor Kieftel, the humans have proven more resilient than anticipated, but the real problem is that their resistance has inspired similar actions among our subject species. Inspired? The Emperor's voice carried a dangerous edge. You mean our subjects are rebelling because they saw barbarians destroy a few ships? Not rebelling exactly, Your Majesty. More like coordinated non-compliance. Production schedules are missed. Communication networks experience failures. Transport ships develop navigation problems. Each incident is small, but together they're disrupting Imperial operations across hundreds of systems. Emperor Zythael studied the display, his ancient mind processing information with the cold calculation that had built the Empire. Then we remind them why they chose submission over extinction. Deploy the Imperial Guard to the human colony of New Geneva. Make an example that will restore order throughout the galaxy. On the colony world of New Geneva, Administrator Nathan Clark received the evacuation order with grim determination. The planet housed 3 million human colonists, mostly families of deep space workers and research scientists. Sir, his aide reported, Imperial ships are approaching the system. Long-range sensors show at least 50 vessels, including several we don't recognize. Their energy signatures are off our charts. Nathan looked out at the sprawling city that bore his name, thinking of the children in the schools, the families in their homes, the elderly in their care centers. 3 million lives depending on his decisions. Open a channel to all residents, he ordered. This is Administrator Clark with an emergency announcement. Imperial forces are approaching New Geneva with hostile intent. All civilians should evacuate immediately to the prepared shelters. But instead of panic, Nathan received a response he hadn't expected. His communication board lit up with incoming messages from throughout the colony. Mr. Clark, this is Dr. Lisa Chang at the university. My students and I are staying to help with the defense. Administrator, this is Foreman Joe Martinez at the industrial complex. My crews have rigged the factories with explosives. If the Empire wants our equipment, they'll get scrap metal. Sir, this is Principal Mary Thompson at Central School. We've evacuated the children, but the teachers are volunteering for whatever you need. Nathan felt tears in his eyes as message after message arrived. The people of New Geneva had heard about Earth's resistance, had seen the footage of human ships fighting impossible odds, and had decided they would rather stand with their species than run from the Empire. All right, people, Nathan broadcast to the colony. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. This is New Geneva. This is human soil, and we don't surrender. The Imperial Guard fleet that arrived at New Geneva was unlike anything the humans had previously encountered. These weren't the standard Imperial warships with their crystalline hulls and energy weapons. The guard ships were smaller, faster, and deadlier, equipped with technology that made regular Imperial forces look primitive. Guard Commander Thaisaval observed the human colony from orbit, noting the defensive preparations with professional interest. Admirable, he admitted to his staff. They actually intend to resist rather than evacuate. Shall we proceed with orbital bombardment, Commander? Asked his tactical officer. No. The Emperor wants a demonstration that will discourage further resistance throughout the galaxy. We will take the colony intact, break their spirit completely, then broadcast their surrender to every world in the Empire. What followed was the longest siege in human colonial history. The Imperial Guard landed elite troops equipped with personal energy shields, advanced weapons, and combat experience from hundreds of conquered worlds. They expected to overwhelm the colonists within days. Instead, they found themselves fighting a desperate but determined population that had learned from Earth's example. Every street became a battlefield, every building a fortress. The colonists used improvised weapons, guerrilla tactics, and their knowledge of the local terrain to turn their city into a deadly maze for the invading forces. Teenager Maya Zhang, an engineering student at the Colonial University, became the symbol of the resistance when she and her classmates converted the school's chemistry lab into a weapons factory. Using basic materials and textbook knowledge, they produced explosives, incendiary devices, and chemical weapons that proved surprisingly effective against Imperial technology. The key, Maya explained to the other student volunteers, is that their equipment is designed to counter advanced weapons, not primitive ones. A homemade bomb works just as well as a sophisticated missile if you can get it close enough. The siege stretched from days into weeks. Imperial casualties mounted as the colonists refused to break under pressure. Every guard soldier lost was a trained professional who could not be easily replaced, while the humans seemed willing to fight to the last person. Dr. Amanda Fox, monitoring the situation from her diplomatic ship, coordinated with resistance cells throughout the Empire to spread news of the siege. The sight of 3 million humans holding off the Empire's elite forces inspired further acts of defiance across the galaxy. The siege of New Geneva is entering its 4th week, she broadcast on all frequencies. Imperial casualties are in the thousands, while the colonists continue to resist. This is what happens when free people are cornered by tyrants. On worlds throughout the Empire, the broadcasts were having exactly the effect Amanda hoped for. Species that had submitted to Imperial rule centuries ago watched humans defending their children with homemade weapons against the Empire's most advanced soldiers. The Thylorians began accidentally damaging Imperial equipment during routine maintenance. The Narratans started experiencing memory problems when asked to locate specific cargo shipments. The Kepri discovered that their manufacturing processes were producing defective components at an alarming rate. Guard Commander Thaisaval found himself trapped in an impossible situation. He could not retreat without admitting defeat to an inferior force, but he could not advance without massive casualties among his irreplaceable elite troops. The end came in the 7th week of the siege, when Maya Zhang made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Imperial forces had finally broken through to the city's central district, where the main fusion power plant provided energy for the colony. Maya and her remaining student volunteers had rigged the plant with explosives, planning to deny it to the Empire if the city fell. But as Imperial Guard troops closed in on their position, she realized they could do more than just deny the enemy a prize. "This is Maya Zhang broadcasting to anyone listening," she transmitted, as Imperial soldiers stormed the power plant. "We are human. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. And we do not go quietly into the night." The explosion that followed destroyed not only the power plant, but an entire Imperial Guard assault wave that had been preparing to occupy the facility. The blast was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire that served as New Geneva's final message to the galaxy. In the aftermath, as Guard Commander Thesaval surveyed the ruins of the colony, he realized that the Emperor's plan had backfired completely. Instead of demonstrating Imperial power, the siege had shown the galaxy what happened when humans were pushed to their limits. 3 million colonists had held off the Empire's best troops for 7 weeks, using primitive weapons and determination. Maya Zhang's final broadcast had been heard across hundreds of systems, inspiring others to similar acts of defiance. Status report, Emperor Zythael demanded when news of the siege's end reached Zephyr Prime. "The colony has been pacified, Your Majesty," Strategic Advisor Keftel reported carefully, "but the cost was significant. We lost over 3,000 Guard troops and substantial equipment." "And the effect on the other rebellions?" Keftel hesitated before answering. "The opposite of what we intended, Your Majesty. Reports of non-compliance have increased by 400% since the siege began. Several species are openly defying Imperial directives." The Emperor stood silent for a long moment, processing the reality that his overwhelming response had only made the crisis worse. The humans had turned a demonstration of Imperial power into proof of Imperial weakness. "Prepare the Imperial fleet," he finally ordered. "All reserves, all auxiliaries, everything we have. If the galaxy wants to test our resolve, we will show them what happens when the full might of the Empire is unleashed." But even as he gave the orders, more reports arrived of equipment. The final battle for galactic freedom began at Zephyr Prime, the heart of the Empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. Captain Ryan Blake, now commanding the rebuilt Defiance, led a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Alongside, human warships flew vessels from dozens of species that had finally found the courage to fight for their freedom. Thylorian cruisers with their distinctive 4-winged design moved in formation, with sleek Neridan submarines adapted for space combat. Kepri industrial ships had been converted into mobile weapons platforms, their insectoid crews eager to test their engineering skills in battle. "All ships, this is Captain Blake," Ryan broadcast to the massive rebel fleet. "Today we fight not just for humanity, but for every species that has ever dreamed of freedom. The Empire ends here." The Imperial response was overwhelming. Emperor Zythael had gathered the largest fleet in Imperial history, over 2,000 warships drawn from every corner of the galaxy. At the center of this massive formation was the Emperor's personal dreadnought, the Eternal Dominion, a ship the size of a small moon equipped with weapons that could destroy entire planets. "Attention, rebel forces," the Emperor's voice carried across space, ancient and filled with cold authority. "You face the combined might of 10,000 years of Imperial rule. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Continue this futile resistance, and I will make your species extinct." President Maria Santos, now aboard the diplomatic vessel UES Hope, responded with words that would be remembered for generations. "Emperor Zythael, your empire was built on fear and oppression. Today, the galaxy chooses freedom over security, courage over submission. We stand together as equals, not as your slaves." The battle began when the Emperor activated his ultimate weapon, a planet-killing beam array that could sterilize entire worlds. The target was Earth itself, a final demonstration. that rebellion would not be tolerated. But the rebels had learned from humanity's example of thinking differently. As the massive energy beam charged up, Captain Jake Morrison led a desperate assault fleet directly at the Emperor's dreadnought. "This is Jake Morrison to all ships," he transmitted. "We're going straight at them. No fancy tactics, no clever strategies. Just pure human stubbornness and the will of free peoples everywhere." The assault fleet included volunteers from across the galaxy. Dr. Amanda Fox coordinated diplomatic communications that kept the Alliance together, even as ships were destroyed around them. Rebecca Jones, now commanding a mixed crew of humans and alien refugees, led her converted cargo hauler into the heart of the Imperial formation. "For New Geneva," she shouted as her ship's missiles found their target. "For Maya Zheng and everyone who died refusing to kneel." The space around Zephyr Prime became a chaotic battlefield as 2,000 Imperial ships clashed with 1,500 rebel vessels. The Empire had superior numbers and technology, but the rebels had something the Empire had forgotten: the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. Admiral Casey Miller, recovered from his wounds at the Battle of Saul, commanded the human naval forces from his new flagship, the UES Liberty II. "All human ships, remember your training. Hit fast, hit hard, and make every shot count." But the real key to victory came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sophie Turner, Earth's weapons specialist, had been studying captured Imperial technology for months. She had discovered something that the Empire's own engineers had forgotten. The planet-killing weapon drew power from every Imperial ship in the fleet. "If we can disrupt the power network," she explained to the rebel commanders, "we can overload their own weapon and turn it against them." The plan was insanely dangerous. Rebel ships would have to penetrate deep into the Imperial formation, target specific power relay nodes, and coordinate their attacks perfectly. The timing would have to be exact, or the weapon would fire and destroy Earth. Captain Ryan Blake volunteered the Defiance for the most dangerous part of the mission, getting close enough to the Emperor's dreadnought to plant the disruption device directly on the weapon array. "This is probably a one-way trip," he told his crew. "Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship has 5 minutes. Not a single crew member left their post." The final assault was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Rebel ships from dozens of species fought with desperate courage against the Empire's overwhelming firepower. The Thylorian cruiser Brightwing rammed an Imperial battleship to clear a path for the Defiance. A group of Kepri engineers sacrificed their converted freighter to destroy a key power relay. Dr. Helen Costa, still aboard Ben Parker's reconnaissance ship, provided tactical intelligence as the battle raged. "Ryan, you've got a clear path to the weapon array. 30 seconds before they can target you." The Defiant screamed through space, dodging energy beams and missile salvos as Ryan pushed the ship to its limits. Behind them, the rebel fleet was being decimated by superior Imperial firepower, but they were buying time with their lives. "Devices planted," reported the Defiance's engineer as they pulled away from the massive dreadnought. 30 seconds to detonation." Emperor Zythael, watching from his command throne, realized what the rebels were attempting. "All ships, emergency power to defensive systems. They're trying to overload the primary weapon." But it was too late. The disruption device activated just as the planet killer fired, sending feedback through the power network that connected every Imperial ship. Instead of destroying Earth, the weapon's energy reflected back through the fleet, overloading shields and power systems throughout the Imperial formation. The explosion that followed was visible from 100 light-years away. The Eternal Dominion, the Empire's most powerful warship, was torn apart by its own weapon. Hundreds of Imperial ships suffered critical damage as their power systems overloaded. In the chaos that followed, something unprecedented happened. Imperial ship after Imperial ship simply stopped fighting. Crews that had served the Empire for generations looked around at the destruction and realized that their cause was lost. The surrender began with a single Zephyrian captain who broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Captain Velthar of the Imperial, Cruiser Star's Edge. I surrender to the rebel forces." Within minutes, dozens of other Imperial ships followed suit. The Empire's navy, faced with certain destruction and inspired by the rebels' courage, chose survival over continued servitude to a dying regime. Emperor Zethiel, his flagship crippled and his fleet surrendering around him, made one final, desperate offer. "Humans," he transmitted to President Santos, "you have won. Take my empire. Rule in my place. Surely that was your goal all along." President Santos's response became one of the most famous speeches in galactic history. "Emperor, we didn't fight to replace one tyrant with another. We fought so that every species could choose its own destiny. The age of empires is over. Welcome to the age of free peoples." The formal surrender took place on Zephyr Prime itself, with representatives from every species that had participated in the rebellion. The document they signed wasn't a treaty of conquest, but a charter of liberation, the Galactic Accord. Under the Accord, every species would govern itself according to its own values and traditions. Trade would be voluntary, cooperation would be mutual, and no single power would ever again dominate the galaxy through fear. Jake Morrison, promoted to admiral after the battle, stood with President Santos as they watched the last Imperial flags being lowered across Zephyr Prime. "Do you think it will work?" he asked. "Can all these different species really live together as equals?" Maria Santos looked out at the mixed crowds celebrating in the streets below, humans and aliens working together to build something entirely new. "Jake, 6 months ago we were a single species on one world, facing an impossible choice between freedom and survival. Today we're part of a galactic community of free peoples. If we can accomplish that, we can accomplish anything." Years later, Ambassador Maria Santos would address the Confederacy Council in the same chambers where the Empire had once ruled through fear. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Former Imperial worlds prospered under democratic governments. Trade flowed freely between systems that had once been forced to serve the Empire's needs. Children of dozens of species grew up learning about the humans who had taught the galaxy to stand. "We came to the stars seeking knowledge and found chains," Maria told the assembled representatives. "We could have accepted those chains and lived as comfortable slaves. Instead, we chose to break them, not just for ourselves, but for everyone." The memorial to the heroes of New Geneva stood in the center of the new capital, a simple stone bearing Maya Jiang's final words. "We are human. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. And we do not go quietly into the night." But perhaps the most fitting memorial was the galaxy itself, free at last from the shadow of empire, where every species could choose its own path among the stars. Humanity had stumbled into a galactic empire and refused to kneel. In doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had forgotten it could have: the courage to stand up and be free. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it had. All started with 52 human ships and the simple conviction that some things are worth fighting for no matter the odds.